When a remake is announced in gaming, a pendulum of emotions usually strikes the communities that care about it. From doubt and dubious concerns to acting as if their final plea in this world was heard, it leaves everyone wanting to look at the blueprint of something that previously constructed something so great and wonder about the parts used to build it again. But in this schematic, how do you get the new parts to fit in with the old? Do you remove some of the old to make space for the new? And how do you manage to have this iteration be even better this time around? Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Anna. I'm a variety gamer who's been playing games for well over 20 years. So I'm the type of person who likes to reminisce at the end of every year, and now that it's almost the end of 2024, I was looking back at all the games that I've beaten this year, and I realized that a good chunk of them were actually remakes. So I started the year off with Final Fantasy VII Remake, then went into Persona 3 Reload, then into Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, then later in the year I played Until Dawn, if you really even count that. That's more of a remaster in my opinion, and then most recently I beat Silent Hill 2 Remake. I realized that with remakes, my reason for playing them is a little bit more intentional and varied than my reason for playing like a new game, for example. I think quite often when I pick up a new game, it's more so for the reason of it looks fun, or someone recommended it to me, or a lot of people are playing it, so I just wanted to check it out. But just taking last year, for example, I played through Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4 Remake, and my reason for playing those games were more so because I remember playing them in my childhood, but I don't really remember them fully, so being able to experience them as remakes and experiencing that nostalgia at the same time were more so my reason for picking up those games. Taking Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, I knew the legacy that this game had, but I kind of missed out on it as a kid, so it was my chance to finally experience it again as remakes. Paper Mario Thousand Year Door was actually a remake that I intentionally didn't pick up because I felt like I wasn't actually the target audience for that game. So I know Thousand Year Door really well because I just used to watch speedrunners play that game, and because I knew it so well, I felt like this remake actually wasn't for me. I feel like the original really holds up in terms of how it looks, and it didn't seem like there was much added content in terms of like story or gameplay, so I thought like, you know what, for someone who knows the game so well, I don't really think that I need to be picking up this game. The latest remake I beat was Silent Hill 2, and this was kind of a special case because I beat the original only a few months prior to playing the remake, and I was very familiar with the original because I made this whole video spoiling the entirety of the game, and when you make a video like that, it's pretty hard not to be super familiar with the game. I really wanted to see how they expanded on something that's been long regarded as like a perfect story, and with the reputation Bloober Team had, I wanted to see how they expanded upon this story and retold it in a way that showed that they got it. Spoilers, I thought they executed it really well, and I was really happy with this remake. I had some gripes that I will explain, but overall I really did love it. So for the main topic of this video, I wanted to discuss this remake and really analyze how they expanded upon this story and retold a story that's been long beloved in a fresh new way. Obviously, spoilers ahead, I'm going to be talking about little things from every part of this game. I'm also going to be talking as if you know the original Silent Hill 2 story. If you have no interest in playing Silent Hill 2 yourself and you want to be caught up to watch this video, go watch my spoiler video on the original Silent Hill 2 that walks you through the entire story. And obviously Silent Hill 2 deals with a lot of dark things, so please look up the content warnings before proceeding. So first, let's talk about the most obvious things that are being updated in a remake, which are graphics and gameplay improvements. I actually kind of had like a surreal out-of-body experience walking through the area right before you actually get into the town of Silent Hill. I was kind of just like looking around and soaking it all in, and I was just like, whoa, this looks crazy because it just looks so real. I had a video that went kind of viral where I talk about how I appreciate modern technology and graphics in video games today a lot more because I was around long enough where when I was a kid, everything looked like, you know, polygons and just looked very primitive compared to what they look like today. And I think that's why I had that kind of surreal experience just like walking through the area before the town and being like, wow, this is real. And I just played the original game where everything just looks so primitive compared to what this looks like now. This game is absolutely a case where everything just looking more nice and real definitely adds to the storytelling. I saw a mod that basically lifts the fog from the town of Silent Hill, and it was funny because my first reaction to seeing that was, wow, this actually looks like a nice vacation spot. I can see why James and Mary decided to stay here. And if it isn't obvious, everything is just way scarier in this remake. You know, the original was scary, but this remake just makes Silent Hill look truly like its own personal hell. You know, in the original, I think some monsters you could get by saying they just look like fleshy blobs, but in this remake, the monsters are definitely not so subtle anymore. Enemies like the mannequins have you just gripping your metal pipe because you just feel like you're gonna get jumped just turning a corner. And we absolutely need to talk about the sound design. I thought that this added a whole new layer to the horror element of this game. The unsettling whispers that happen in that one room in the apartments. What? What? The random whispers that you would hear from a woman throughout the entirety of the game. And of course we had moments like Pyramid Head walking through the halls. What? Why? And for me, an unexpected part of adding to the terror of this whole thing was actually the controller vibrations. I played it on the PS5 and I'm really glad I did because the controller vibrations definitely add a horror element to this game. The first time you see Pyramid Head, it's not actually that scary on screen, but the fact that the controller is just vibrating like crazy kind of just makes you scared to look at him. Is that our friend Pyramid Head? Is that our buddy? Hello. Oh my god, the controller is vibrating like crazy. That is so scary, actually. There's also that one part in the hotel where the music kind of like ramps up, things start to break, and then the controller is like slowly vibrating more and more. Oh my god, I literally have chills going down my body. I am fucking out of here. And I think because like another sense was activated in that moment, it like triggered my fight or flight and I just ran through. I just like didn't stop and headed to the first safe area I could find. In terms of gameplay, I remember the devs saying before I started playing this game that this game was roughly going to take like 15 to 20 hours, and I was really wondering how they were going to add 10 hours of gameplay onto the original. They obviously did this in a way where they added so much more puzzles, so much more exploration in the original spots that you visit, and I would say that this was added in a pretty tasteful manner. One of my favorite moments was actually in the hospital, the nightmare hospital, where James opens a box after completing the puzzle and there's nothing in there, and it kind of goes with the whole what you are looking for isn't here message. There's obviously a lot of newspapers and articles that give more historical context to what exactly Silent Hill is, and new locations in town to explore, like the various shops that you can break into. There's a bunch of letters and recordings that give evidence on the people that were here and what they went through and reflected their mental state. This is especially prevalent in the hospital and kind of has its own side story through the letters. In terms of combat, I felt like this is a pretty straightforward upgrade from the original. I think when the devs actually released that combat trailer, it was kind of a double-edged sword because it kind of sent a mixed signal to the audience, showcasing that this might be more of like a Resident Evil type of game, guns blazing and all that, but it really wasn't. It was actually exactly how I expected this game to upgrade the original combat system. To me, I felt like this was objectively a better upgrade from the original because the original's combat is just very plain. So next, let's talk about our characters, starting with James, our protagonist. So I think a very common thing with modern remakes that look very hyper realistic is that they will update the dialogue in a way that's more modern as well. This mostly means stripping the dialogue of overly cheesy or corny dialogue, and this is absolutely the case with James in this remake. The original James is very overly cartoonish and pretty exaggerated with the way he conveys emotions.
Eddie, you can't just kill someone because of the way they looked at you.
And that's completely gone in this remake. James is an entirely different person in this game.
My name is James. James Sunderland.
Eddie.
Eddie, okay. So, Do you live here, Eddie?
He's so much more stoic, almost to a fault in my opinion, which I will explain later, and much more reserved as a person. Although I think he's more believable as a character that a little girl like Laura wouldn't like compared to the original. So I don't know if this is a hot take, but in terms of Maria, I felt like her acting wasn't the best compared to the original. I think it was mostly her range of emotions, and I don't know if that's because of, you know, the facial expressions that she made or her delivery of the lines, but I felt like she just could have had more range in terms of the emotional delivery. I felt like she had being sad and being seductive towards James on lock, but the anger and frustration part I felt like wasn't conveyed as powerfully as the original. This is the one instance where I do want to compare side to side of this one scene where Maria gets mad at James in the hospital.
Anyway, I'm glad you're alive.
Anyway? What do you mean, anyway? I was almost killed back there. I have never been so scared in my whole life. All you care about is that dead wife of yours. You couldn't care less about me, could you?
No, I just...
Then stay with me. Don't leave me alone again. You're supposed to take care of me.
Anyway, I'm glad you're alive.
Anyway? What do you mean, anyway? You don't sound very happy to see me. I was almost killed back there. Why didn't you try to save me? All you care about is that dead wife of yours. I've never been so scared in my whole life. You couldn't care less about me, could you?
No, I
Then
just...
stay with me. Don't ever leave me alone. You're supposed to take care of me.
I think it's really important that she kind of has that whiplash of emotions of switching to being really angry, because that better conveys the range of emotions that she had to go through while she was hospitalized. The most compelling character for me in this remake was definitely Angela. I felt like her scenes were done really well. I wouldn't say it was like an upgrade from the original, because I like original Angela a lot, but it was just another depiction of her character that I thought was done really well. We got new scenes with Angela, like the one at the statue, where it actually added good content to her lore.
Oh, you didn't happen to see a little girl around here, did you?
A little girl?
Yeah, Angela? Are you alright? Angela?
No. Please. You shouldn't be here.
Angela, it's okay.
No, don't touch me!
And by far, the part that left the most lasting impression from the entire game was absolutely the Abstract Daddy fight. I've never experienced a boss fight quite like that fight in a video game before. I ended up crying after I beat that boss fight because it was just a lot. I had a very visceral reaction to it. Damn, I didn't expect to get choked up at that scene. The way they remade that whole entire boss fight was just a lot. I need a minute. So obviously, just looking at the character model itself, we know what Abstract Daddy clearly represents compared to the original. I think in the original, it's a little bit harder to make out, but in this remake, there's no mistaking what that is. The fight itself is much more intense than I expected. There's that part where you see Angelo run into a closet, and in the fight itself, that's the only safe space where you can hide, and it's also the only area that's silent. Where'd she go? In between the parts where you're actually fighting, you hear the father's voice, and I think giving a voice to the actual father figure makes him much more real and terrifying.
But you sick? Care of you all these years. I've been in it. What I did? Look at me!
And eventually, as the boss fight goes on, the house falls apart and reveals the fleshy room. You see the machinery hanging around the walls and the ceiling, and the movement of the machines sound like a woman screaming. So yeah, after that moment, I kind of just had to take a little break because I was just thinking about all the things that Angela went through. They really just used that boss fight to depict Angela's story in a way that was so much more powerful. And this is exactly the kind of thing that I was looking for in a remake, where they just took a story that we knew before and just expanded upon it in a way where it felt like I was gonna remember that for a long time. In the final moment that we see Angela, I kind of had a gripe with this. Basically, it's the part where she's at the stairs and there's fire all around. It's a small thing, but I didn't really like the fact that James leaves in the middle of her climbing the stairs, because in the original, you basically have the option to just watch her disappear into the fire up the stairs. And I like the fact that in the original, you can move around actually and try to go up the stairs, but the flames literally block you. I think that was representative of, you know, feeling helpless, like wanting to do something, but you literally can't. And in the remake, the fact that James just kind of leaves, I think that James cares about Angela just as a human being, and I think that's communicated well in the original. But with this remake, I think the fact that he just like walks away during that kind of shows more of an emotional disconnect that he has with the characters. Maybe it goes back to the whole like very stoic, very reserved, that he kind of comes off a little bit unemotional because of that. And I just feel like this is going against his character a little bit. Eddie and Laura, I didn't feel much in terms of their remakes. I felt like their scenes were pretty one-to-one to the original. However, I did think that Eddie was much more serious and scary in this remake. I think the original Eddie was much more of that, you know, insecure and lost teenager that kind of is unsure of himself the entire game, and because of that, his violent tendencies ramp up more as the game goes on. In the remake, he's kind of scary from the beginning, and I felt like he wasn't scared of his actions from the very start. He didn't seem that scared that he, you know, killed someone in the prison, and he was just like seemed kind of violent and scary from the beginning. In terms of James killing Eddie, maybe it's the fact that Eddie is a lot more intimidating in this remake, that I felt like there's a lot more of an emotional disconnect James has to Eddie. When James kills him, it's more of a silent holy shit I did that, rather than oh my god I just killed someone, what have I done, like in the original. And this reflection of James as a person towards Eddie, I think made me feel differently about the ending I got, which I will explain shortly. I think with every remake, it's important to have references and Easter eggs that fans can find. It just gives you that warm, fuzzy feeling of being excited that you understood something that they were clearly referencing from the original game. I did like the whole like revisited spots thing that they did in this remake, where you would just like find old areas. I think it kind of signaled to the audience like, hey, we know that this is an old area and this is how it went, but we're doing it a new way. We're still giving you the satisfaction of knowing what this is. Obviously, this remake, as they were adding a bunch of new content, got rid of a lot of stuff, but I like how they preserved a lot of the most iconic parts of the original game. Some examples were like the prison scream that I actually went and actively looked for. Okay, is this where it happens? There's a scream here that happens, right? No? Are you gonna scream or not? The hospital elevator puzzle.
Everyone, thanks.
Oh, they brought it back.
Welcome to another exciting edition of Trick or Treat.
There was that part where you would visit the Born from a Wish location, and Maria actually talks about how this place feels familiar to her.
Is everything all right?
Yeah, it's just... this place just gives me the creeps. I'm not sure why.
you ever been inside?
I'm not sure. It does feel familiar somehow. Like a bad memory.
One of the first things I actually did when starting up this game was look in the back seat of James's car, and I did feel like there was something there. It was really hard to see, but I think it's so cool that you can actually kind of see something is there, and that's just like something that a fan that knows the story can immediately find. I also remembered to check Maria's letter and see that it's blank after killing Eddie, and there's other just like fun Easter eggs, like finding Maria's old outfit in the closet. And finally, let's talk about the endings of this game. I'm not going to go through every ending, but I do want to talk about first the ending that I got. So originally, my favorite ending from the original game was the leave ending. In the original game, I thought that this was the best ending, and it was my favorite ending because I just felt like it fit the best with the message behind the game and James's journey, and I was actively going for this ending in this remake because it was my favorite ending in the original game. But actually, the leave ending was not my favorite in the remake. I just felt like James was really stoic in this ending towards Mary and relatively unemotional compared to the original, that I felt like even though it's the same ending as the original James's emotional delivery made him seem more deserving of this ending, and the remake James less so. However, I do think this was redeemed because they added some new endings, and one of the endings is called Stillness, and I think that's my favorite ending now. In the Stillness ending, James is talking to Mary in his car, and he's crying and just feeling so remorseful and guilty towards her, and this is the emotional delivery I was looking for in James. I looked this ending up, and apparently a lot of people actually believe that James didn't drive himself into the lake. A lot of people caught that the audio cues for this ending is a little different from the in-water ending where he drives himself into the lake with Mary. In the Stillness ending, it kind of sounds like he turns on the car, gets out, and then drives the car with Mary's body into the lake, which symbolizes more of like a burial for Mary while he decides to still live on. So me choosing to believe that he lives on in the Stillness ending, I felt like preserves the fact that he moves on with his life as Mary told him to. Yeah, he still carries that emotional burden that he deserves. But who knows, because the devs did leave something that I found was really interesting and really fun, which were the Polaroids. So throughout the entirety of the game, you collect these Polaroids, and after a lot of deciphering from the community, someone figured out that these Polaroids represent a message, and that message is, you've been here for 2 decades, which feeds into that theory that James has been in an infinite loop in Silent Hill for 20 years. And I think something like that is actually really fun because I feel like the community was heard in terms of like putting it into the game in some way, some shape or form, and leaves the community something to ponder over while not giving like a direct answer of whether James is actually in like this infinite loop. And ultimately, it's really just up to you whether you believe James is in a loop or not, whether he broke out of that loop. It's just all up for interpretation. So those are pretty much all my thoughts on this remake. I felt like I was obligated to just do a whole video on this remake and my thoughts on it because I did a whole video spoiling the original. I would love to know whether you guys played this remake, and if you did, what your thoughts were on it, or just like remakes in general that you liked playing this year. What are some of the good ones you played? So until the next video, thank you guys so much for watching. Bye.